Oh, hey, I'll give it maybe a minute and then I'll get started. I set up my beautiful workspace here with my table runner that I use at cons, a few bears, masks. There are masks pretty much everywhere in this house now. They're all over the place. Yes, we can chat. I'm gonna be reading the chat when I can, but if I miss a question, please tag me and just drop it back in there or something. I'm gonna try to pay attention. Uh, give it one moment. I'll mute myself for 1 second. I'll be back in 20 seconds, okay? I'm back. Sorry. Husband got home and I wanted to warn him that I'm live before he said something stupid. Um, all right. So, welcome everyone. My name is Joaquin Baldwin. I am a lot of things. I still work at Disney. I've been there for 14 years or so now, doing layout, cinematography, and a whole bunch of things in there. But mostly during my free time lately, I've been working on the Noss Saga, which is my baby. It's like the biggest project I ever tackled, honestly, and it's been consuming my life since ever, and it's been years now, and I basically just sit here and work on that day and night nowadays. And I wanted to talk to. I want to thank Bash for inviting me to this because transformation is a really big theme in the saga. It's at the core of it, honestly. It's where all the main metaphors for the themes of sexuality and gender really get started in the saga. And so I wanted to basically just do a little reading of some parts of the book, some of which are going to be spoilery, but I'm going to warn you before reading the spoilery stuff, and then kind of explain how, for me, I try to do something different with transformation, something slightly different from what you normally see in different literature or movies or games, and I think it's kind of tied to the magic system that I'm going to try to explain a little bit better. And then yeah, we can just talk about it. I'm gonna take questions whenever, so let's try to keep this open. It is very quiet here except for some footsteps of my husband around, so feel free to jump in and ask questions anytime you want. So to get started, I just wanted to explain a little bit of how the magic system and the Noss Saga works. There's That's basically how it's gonna be slightly spoilery, but there's stuff that happens in books 2 and 3 that explain the magic system a bit better, and it is how all the magical things in the world are explained, even though it's not true magic as you would see in most fantasy series. I always try to ground everything into scientific concepts, and I think this has been the key thing in trying to figure out how to make transformation possible, even though it's impossible in any scientific way. And so the core thing that I developed for the entire concept of the magic system is the idea of the etheric elements. And the etheric elements are, if you can imagine that some elements, or perhaps all elements, I don't really know. I don't know as a writer yet. I still have to explore a lot of this. Um, Imagine that some elements have an etheric counterpart, which is basically a version of the element that acts in every way the same as any other of that element would, except for one property. Let's call it magical property, even though there's still conservation on energy and other things. I don't want it. I don't want to deal with it as if it was magic, but just some different types of energy, basically. So imagine you will have iron, and then you have etheric iron, which is called magnium in this case, and it's when you alloy magnium with other metals, they turn magnetic. Nothing that grand, it's just a minor property. But not all metals tend to be magnetic. It depends on the composition, the orientation of the atoms, and everything else. But magnium infuses that property to other metals. Or you would have soot, which is oh, bears, hi. Hey, Zach. Or you had soot, which is the etheric counterpart to carbon, which in some ways allows people to glimpse the connections between different carbon-based life forms or conscious beings, which it gets a little more mystical, magical, but there is an explanation through all that and how it works. It's just another type of energy. Or you would have ignium, which is the counterpart to oxygen, which when it oxidizes or it basically produces energy in some way, it does so in orders of magnitude more energy than you will get released by normal oxygen. So it would be a hyperoxidant in some ways. And then there's, if you imagine going that way through many elements or perhaps all elements, you have a whole variety of properties or powers or magical essences of sorts that you could work with. Now imagine that these masks, which are mostly made of soot, the etheric counterpart of carbon, contain more than just one element into them. That's slightly spoilery, but people kind of see that coming. So what would happen? And that's how I justify the idea of transformation being possible in this world. And I don't go into too much detail because it's kind of it gets too much sciencey, bullshitty at some points, and you gotta over-explain things. So I try to leave it a little open, so I don't write myself into holes too much. And but using this, I developed this idea of what I call the threads in the books. And the threads, if I guess my inspiration is a little too obvious if you play Final Fantasy VII in the live stream. That's kind of where this probably came from. And it's the idea that all living things are connected in some ways, but those connections are visible if you have the right frame of mind, or in this case, this magical, the magical attributes of this mask. You can glimpse these threads that are more than just metaphors. They are physical manifestations of a force that is not only about connecting things, but also it can be used for the process of transformation. And they actually become physically visible during the short moment during which the transformation happens. So I wanted to read a few chapters, or not chapters, just little segments of the Noss Saga that show this, and try to see if it's it's in part 3 of the 3 parts of book 1. So it's slightly spoilery, but it's not. Everyone knows that there's going to be transformation in this book, and everyone kind of can guess who is getting transformed by the art that I've been showing. So it's not that big of a deal. So I'm gonna start with one of my favorite ones, which is about the moment that Lago is the protagonist, first discovers that one character called Banuk actually is able to shapeshift. And it's not only that he can shapeshift, but he's actually basically the spirit of bears or bear kind, and he can take the shape of any bear that he wants. And let me skip over here. Can you hear the sounds in the background, by the way? I don't know if you can hear all the mess in there. Nope. Oh, cool. All right. Yeah, there's stuff happening in the kitchen right now. Okay, so in this chapter, I'm actually reading from the physical book, which is kind of cool. I love this. In this chapter, Banuk basically is showing Lago how transformation works and trying to explain and help him visualize and actually physically see what is happening. So I'm gonna read from here. Let me see. I'm gonna see how far should I take this. Just gonna be a couple pages, not too much. So, all right. So they're setting up the scene. They are standing at the terrace in Banuk's cabin on the outside, and Banuk is trying to basically mentor Lago through how to use the mask that he's been learning to wield, but he still doesn't know all the powers that it holds, and he's trying to learn how to shapeshift himself. So Banuk is talking to them. There's a couple other characters in the scene, but just mostly about Banuk and Lago. And at that moment, Banuk is getting ready to show him how things work, and the book reads, Banuk unclasps his bearkin's cape and let it drop to the ground, then pulled his tunic off, revealing his hairy chest and round belly. There we go. That's what everyone is waiting for. Um, Another important thing, Banuk said, stepping out of his boots, is to be careful with your clothing, as you don't want to, he unbuckled his belt, ruin them the way I did the other night. For context, he actually took the shape of a bear just the night before, scaring them. That's when they discovered what was going on in there. He dropped his heavy trousers and loose briefs and stood there in front of Lago, completely naked. Lago stared at Banuk's belly, then at the white cock dangling in the shadow beneath it. He's beautiful, he thought, utterly frozen. What was it that larger man attracted him so? Why was it? Something irresistibly sensual was embodied in Banuk's curves, in the shapes and folds beneath his arms, in the plump pad around his cock. Something primal and assertive concealed in the fullness of his beard, his imposing height, in his enormous hands. Something innocent and youthful softened his features, his playful demeanor, his flushed skin. Lago understood he could be crushed by the bearish man, yet felt reassured by his very presence. Dominant and acquiescent, tender and rough, Banuk was the epitome of all that he had desired. He was standing there naked, exposing himself with no hint of self-consciousness. His body is perfect. I wish I could hold him. I wish I could bury myself in his hairy chest. I wish... Come on, cub, take them off, Banuk said. When I said there is no pain in shape-shifting, I hadn't considered clothing. It can be quite painful, particularly if you are ripping through leather. Lago's heart began to thump, anxiety boiling through him. The three spectators try to read the scene, unsure of what to do. Those are the other characters in the scene there. Could I just watch you do it first? Lago asked, hot embarrassment reddening his face. Alea walked up to rescue him. It is a bit cold out for skinny people like ourselves. Let him warm up to it first. She placed her cloak over Lago's shoulders, knowing full well that Lago would have a tough time removing his clothes in front of a crowd. Very well, Banuk said. Pay attention and study how my body conforms into the next shape. You won't need Agnar yourself yet. I prefer you watch with your own eyes this time. He stepped uncomfortably close to Lago and Alea, perhaps unaware of the taboos against nakedness. Lago's face barely reached a handspan over Banuk's deep belly button. He looked up. Banuk stood towering in front of him. Tendrils of gold and gray smoke rose from his reddish hair, from his supple skin. The smoke did not blow away in the breeze, but grew into the larger shape of a translucent bear, forcing Lago and Alea to step back. Banuk's toes lifted, floating within the smoky frame. The figure inside became soft-edged, the smoke refracting, almost like water, yet with a peculiar directionality, as if translucent shards were swimming in the transmuting volume. Threads stretched within the smoke, connecting Banuk's anatomy to the corresponding points of the forming bear's body. Nose, nipples, eyes, toes, ears. Threads flowed from every portion of his body, from every cell, in a burst of dark radiance that soon became opaque. The refractions subsided as the smoke congealed in the twin silhouettes. There stood a bear on his hind legs, a dozen feet in stature, covered in fur more golden than a ripe wheat field. The bear dropped onto four paws that wielded 20 knife-like claws. He was so large that he was eye to eye with Lago after dropping down. His nose was pink and moist, and flexed over his muzzle as he sniffed around. He grunted bear noises that made no sense to the humans. Lago looked shaken, while Alea beamed as if she was staring at the most adorable puppy. I think that's a good place to stop on that one. So yes, you can see in there. So the way I deal with transformation is basically these threads of connection are basically stretching from every part of the anatomy to the corresponding part on the other shape. So the way I deal with anatomy and taxonomy in this book is a little bit over the top, and I try to keep everything tied to, if what is a dew claw and where would that extend or not extend, and what about body parts that don't exist for certain species that have to somehow transform into others. And these threads are basically the things that pull all the pieces apart and bring them back into the new shape. And there's also this idea of translucent refractive smoke that is solid. So it looks like smoke and it looks like it's going to blow away, but if you touch it, it's just solid skin. It's being transmuted and being coalescing into this new form. And that plays a role through all 6 books of the saga. Currently, there's only 2 out, but it's a big thing that I'm working on right now. And so yeah, there's the idea of the threads, the idea of the smoke, and then the idea of taxonomy and basically actual biology being extremely meaningful and how things transform. Like, let's say hypothetically, if there was a mask for pinnipeds, for seals, walruses, and stuff, you wouldn't have 2 legs and a tail, because pinnipeds, their legs are actually their tail, while cetaceans actually have a tail, like dolphins and whales, and their legs are just hidden within their anatomy. They're still there, the little bones. So I want to treat all these species and all these different shapes of the anatomy in their own way, as they would be in the real world. Let me go to another chapter. So another minor spoiler: there's more than one mask. That's kind of obvious from the start of the, or not quite from the start, but it's there's, I'm not going to say how many masks, but there's more masks, and there are masks for different clades. So in this case, this is a canid mask for, dogs, wolves, foxes, vulpines, and canines. There's there's a bear mask, the urset mask, and there's also a cervet mask for moose, elk, reindeer, and all that sort of stuff. So I'm gonna read a little short moment where basically the antagonist of this story ends up picking up the what's called Urxil, which is the cervet mask, and he takes his, what I call the half forms in this book, is his shape, which is that of an elk. So this character he's not quite the main antagonist against Lago yet. In this book, he's kind of more detached. There's another character, Fiorna, who is more directly connected to Lago. But at this point, he's finally, this general, Alvis Hallow is his normal name. He finds out, or finally acquires a mask, and after several days struggling to figure out how it works, he ends up taking his half form. So, very short little thing. That night, from the depths of the dungeon came out not General Alvis Hallow, but a formidable creature, noble and chilling, walking on heavy hoofs, thickly matted in brown fur, wearing a mighty crown of antlers that sprouted 16 sharp points. Alvis Hallow had been transformed into a being with the rough proportions of a man, but the anatomical features and power of an elk stag. His dark eyes scanned with Urxil's twofold sight. His dewlap waved pendulously beneath his long muzzle. His red leather armor snapped seams as his muscles bent and tightened with each step. He was followed into the courtyard by the 7 arbalisters and his chief artificer. As the crowd around him swelled, he rose onto a platform and belted out a high-pitched bugle, a screech like that of an unholy banshee, of a ruthless wraith, which commanded reverence and devotion from all who heard it. His thunderous call proclaimed a new dawn for the Negian Empire. So that's Alvis, and he basically turns into a character. Actually, I think I have the illustration right here. A very crappy version that is black and white. Where am I? There we go. He turns into the red stag, which is a very red illustration on my website, not here. This is just black and white. But that's his chosen name, the red stag. There we go. Thank you, Zach. So yeah, that's So the whole saga follows basically these characters that are struggling to find these masks because other than being awesome to be able to TF, there's a lot of hidden powers that are revealed slowly through the series. Banuk is being Lago's mentor explains a little bit of this how first wearing the mask alone gives you the sight of seeing all these threads and understanding the connections between things, and it's almost like not quite seeing into the future but seeing people's intentions, and that kind of reveals what they're going to do towards you, and that becomes invaluable in battle. And then also that's basically the first stage, is just wearing the mask. But the second stage will be taking your half form, and the half form is basically the totally furry version of yourself. It's half human, half animal, whatever animal species you happen to be more identified with. And then there's a third stage, which is loosely mentioned in book one and might play a role later, which is the feral form, which is once you take your full version of yourself as that animal that kind of represents you. But it comes with its own drawbacks and dangers to take that form. So Banuk warns Lago about this also. And I think, let me see, I should have put a little tag on that one. Give me 1 second. This. One second. Yeah, I'll read a little bit more about after Banuk transforms into the bear. He takes his human form again and explains a little bit more here. So the golden bear then took a few steps back, stood again on 2 legs, and the inverse transformation process began. This time, Lago felt a bit more at ease and walked around the shape-shifting bear, hoping that in the details he would see something to help him understand the process. The refracting smoke vanished, and there stood the naked mountain of a man. It's that easy, Banuk said, putting a friendly arm on Lago's back. Alea was too curious now. Were you not able to talk as a bear? Not as a bear, but I could understand you, though your words sounded muddled and detached. Were you able to observe all the details? Banuk asked Lago, squatting down to be eye to eye with him again. He's enormous. He's 9 feet tall as a human and 12 feet tall as a bear. Um, yes, those lines in the smoke. They look just like the threads that I see with the mask, but somehow made solid or liquid or whatever they are. A keen observation. What they are, who knows? Maybe the Miscam know, or my old friend Mamoru might know, as he always was the smartest of us all. When shapeshifting, you must visualize them moving and connecting to the corresponding points. And I should mention, the process can be much swifter when you properly learn it. It can be performed in the blink of an eye. I only did it slowly so you could appreciate the nuances. Now your turn has come. Did you warm up enough beneath Alea's cloak? And then an awkward scene happens after that. Yeah. By the way, feel free to drop questions in there. I'm keeping an eye on the chat here. So yeah, the whole concept evolves through the books. Actually changed a few things as I was writing, because I wrote all 6 books together. Before publishing book 1, all 6 were written, at least the first draft. And I ended up having to go back and finding that there are some problems in the way I conceptualized some things while I was in book 5 or book 6. And so I went back and changed some rules, and particularly what extra powers the mask gives you. Some were very OP already, and I'm like, it's too much. It's like there's a little bit of this self-indulgent fantasy aspect to it, but I want it to be not that the characters get absolutely everything they can possibly get. There has to be some limitations to this. So I went back and there are a lot of rewrites where I changed some of the rules. I even mentioned on the Noss Saga Discord the other day that at one point I had an idea of having another stage. There's a mask, there's a half form, and then there's a feral form. And I thought I would have the badass hunky werewolf, enormous, brutal kind of shape. But that was like, that's too much, Omegaverse bullshit, and it's too overdone, and it doesn't serve a purpose on this story. It's not what the masks were created for. It wasn't, to make smut. It's really there's a purpose to them that you will learn through the books, and that form just didn't fit the story, and it was too much. So I dropped that idea very early on. I actually didn't end up writing any chapters with that, but it was in the back of my mind that I could use that. Let me read the questions for a second. How were you able to write without getting too far into the weeds of world building? Uh, I got too far into the weeds of world building early on, actually. It's if you see my process, it's quite messy. I I jump from doing a conlang to making maps to creating a whole bunch of background stuff that never gets used or gets changed all the time, and I jump between that and writing all the time. And I think world building to me is how I visualize the world. I'm a very visual person. I have to see the map. It's right there. I have to feel different things. I have to hear the sounds of the languages. So I have to create that first. Otherwise, I'm writing blind. But to me, that's part of the process. I can't just, plot and do, character stuff without seeing the world at the same time. So to me, it's my way of working, and I know that a lot of writers are like, fuck world building. It's like, who needs that shit? It's like, just write your plot and make the characters interact and be lovable and whatnot. I'm like, man, that's your way, not mine. Let me get more questions. Yeah. Any major changes from the copy I was a beta reader for and what ended up being published from Bash? So I'm trying to think what changed. Well, first of all, you were kind of in the middle of the beta readers, not the early, not the late ones. Um, to let everyone know, there's a bunch of, I think I had about 50 or 60 beta readers. Not all of them go through the whole process. Some like start dropping off after, even before finishing book one, and some later. But there's several, a whole bunch of them currently active reading books 4 through 6. So for book one, it's hard to tell. I know that in the rewrite for book one after beta, I cut 30,000 words out. Even though the book is quite thick, it's 180 something thousand words. It used to be 210. That's without the appendices and all that stuff. So I cut a lot of chapters. The actual concepts of transformation, all that stuff, I don't think that changed much, Bash, from what you read. It was just more polished. TF specific stuff was pretty much the same at that point. I kind of had to figure out, because I was very close to the publishing already. I was already working on book 4 or 5 by the time you read it, probably. Let's see. You find yourself fighting to not publish the first book until you had gotten all the drafts? I was actually quite stupid, and I submitted my early draft of book one. Not quite early, not that early. One of I think it was post beta, but not super clean. I submitted it to agents because I'm new to this, or I was new to this a few years back, and I didn't know anything. I'm like, okay, I just gotta, in order to publish faster, I need to send my stuff faster, and I didn't know how agents work and how query letters work and all that stuff. So I try to get it published right away. And if that had happened, it would have been a huge mistake, because the book was not ready. It was still full of errors, and there were some things I ended up changing after finishing book 6 that really affect how the book reads and what the opportunities that it opens for the rest of the saga are. Actually, Bash, I don't know if the etheric elements even played a role when you read beta. Only Soot might have been there, but maybe not all the other elements. So that might have been a big change, because I remember that I had this concept of etheric elements, but I didn't know how to use it. And I just knew that it played some role in transformation. And then I'm like, okay, I need to expand on this. And by book 3 and 4, things get really expanded. And so I went back and rewrote all that stuff. Yeah, it's Soot was always present, because I was like the connecting thing between consciousness and living creatures and all this stuff. But the other ones were not even mentioned, probably by the early beta stuff. Let's see. So yeah, I try to publish very early, and that would have been terrible. Now, I do understand that, if you are doing this for a living, you need to get stuff published quickly, and it's cranking out stuff to actually make money if you can make money as a writer. But to me, it was more, this is a passion project. So I got my day job, and that pays the bills. And this is every other moment of my life I'm investing into this. So I want to make it better than just getting it out there like that. So yeah, it was a mistake for me to try to publish so quickly and not actually clean it up and make the entire saga ready before that. Um, so anyway, let me read another short little thing. This is again very spoilery. If you don't want to hear this, this is like the big spoiler about the main character and what form he takes and all this stuff. But you've seen the art probably. You're probably aware that what's going to happen. But it's a critical moment in the book when it's finally explaining how you reach this state of mind where transformation is possible. So let me go to this. So this is Lago again with Banuk. They're alone this time. They're by this stream. They're just like, Banuk is again mentoring him, trying to get him to understand how the process works. Let me see. Hold on. Let me see how far I should read this for sure. Okay. All right. So Lago talking to Banuk. I've been trying to figure out what species to picture. At first, I only thought about foxes, since both Mawa and Sontai were foxes. And I still don't see you as a fox. I don't either. But lately, I've been focusing on this new image. It's the direwolf that I saw in Withervale. I don't like picturing it because I see his dead face, his dangling tongue, his fiery eyes always staring at me. That seems the obvious choice, and it's what most deeply ties me to the mask. Perhaps it is, or perhaps it's much too obvious. It's not just a species that you must seek. It's finding the precise personification that calls you, the one voice you hear even when you're asleep. Lago suddenly recalled a moment in the Farsul forest, something that had intrigued him at the time, but which he hadn't given more thought to afterward. Malcolm had said that Lago had sleepwalked away from their camp to listen to the sound of wolves howling. Not direwolves, but timber wolves. And as if spellbound in a dream, Lago couldn't remember the incident the next morning. But I've tried focusing on a timber wolf, a tundra wolf, even a steppe wolf, and those didn't work either, he thought. But there is something about that night that feels important. He felt on the verge of a realization, more of a gut feeling. I think I think I want to try this again, he said, standing up. Anouk pulled his feet out of the cold water, turned around, and leaned against the boulder. Lago paced around the edge of the creek, deep in thought. Something brewed in his mind, an image, an idea that had always been inside of him, yet was entirely new to him. He stopped pacing. Instead of trying to wear Banuk's enormous shirt, he let it drop to the ground and put Agnarselv on. He faced the pond of spiraling leaves and let his mind be carried by their hypnotic motion. He forgot for a moment about this place, about his shame, about his scarred leg, and even about Banuk, who sat staring at him. He didn't close his eyes, but let them take in the circular motion of the leaves, while through Agnarselv's eyes he connected to the myriad of organisms that dance in the same spiral. They all blended as one. His mind echoed a distant memory. He was a mountain. No, he was searching for a mountain. He was a meadow, a valley, a wolf. No, not a wolf, an entire pack, dozens of legs trotting in unison. He was a hummingbird, a flower, and the depths of the ocean. Have I dreamed this before? It was microorganisms and consciousnesses all bound into one. He was the stars, and the ether between them. Where is this memory coming from? He stood alone, in a pure darkness deep within his own mind, and looked down, unable to see his own body. He stopped trying to see himself as a half-man, half-canid, and instead pictured a presence in front of him, of a creature separate from himself, but who was still himself. A timber wolf manifested, fur weaving with the breeze. The timber wolf's coat colors were the same as the dead direwolf's had been, subtle grays that dreamed of blue, tail, paws, and head as dark as coal, and dusky rosettes that transitioned the two colors smoothly across his back. The wolf's eyes were drops of luminous amber. The dust-coated Canid was standing in mist beneath softly falling snow. His left side faced Lago, his head turned in the same pose Safis had briefly held after they had rescued her from the dome, before she vanished to freedom. The snowflakes froze in midair and burned brightly, turning into a field of stars speckling a clear night. The wolf's blue-gray coat blended with the delicate hues of the galactic belt. The black face turned one with the dark beyond, and the eyes, like fiery beacons, held their warranted place among the stars. To the stars, Lago. To the stars, a memory reverberated. When Lago came out of his hypnotic trance, he was in a new form. His muzzle was no longer of hard quarr, this material here, but of bone and flesh covered by soft fur. His whiskers pulled upward in a smile as he looked at himself in wonder. He felt a few finger breadths taller, but his leg anatomy changed. He now stood on his toes over leathery pads. The scars on his burned leg made his fur patchy there, but everywhere else his fur shone lustrous and dusky. His coat was a crepuscular gray with inky blue reflections, lighter at the belly and down to his sheath, and transitioning with black rosettes across his back. He saw the blackness of his muzzle and was certain that the rest of his head, up to the tips of his pointed ears, would also be tinted in night. And he knew without a doubt the color of his eyes. He examined his hands or paws as they were a blend of both, shaped mostly like human hands. They had soft pads on them that were pink in color. Each of his wrists held a callous, highly sensitive carpal pad. He was very glad that instead of tiny dew claws, he still retained useful thumbs, even if they looked quite different now. He suddenly noticed he was wagging his tail, which he had not even realized had been behind him all along. He pulled his tail around his hips and caressed it. The fur was much longer there and pitch black, like his head, his foot paws, and hand paws. He looked at Banuk, still sitting against the boulder, and shared with him a smile. Lago leapt on Banuk's belly and hugged his chest. I should stop about there. Yeah, that's one of the key moments in book one, and of course there's more discoveries. There's a lot more given that there's more characters coming and more masks in the story. All these moments of finding your half form are really big key moments through the entire saga, and they're so much fun to write. And even for myself as a writer, as I reach those moments, I'm like, do I really want to use that animal that I thought was the right animal for this person all along? And then suddenly I feel like I'm experiencing the story like themselves and discovering something new about themselves or yourself as you're writing. And it's really amazing how finding those connections is so important. I even, when I started writing this, I wasn't sure if Lago was going to be really a wolf or a fox or some other subspecies here or there. And it just became a process of discovery, and it's super fun to go through that. Oh, what are you spoilering here? Oh yeah, there's not too spoilery art that Zach shared over there. So yeah, feel free to drop more questions and stuff about this or anything else. So I'm basically I'm working on developing all this for all the 6 books right now, and it's a massive amount of work. But to me, the whole idea, the whole concept of transformation to me it's just a metaphor. It's about finding different aspects of yourself and about being able to express them openly. There's a lot about that in all these books. Again, it's simply it's trying to deal with themes of sexuality and gender as well. That's very important, and those play even bigger roles in later books. And yes, it's not quite as muddy as a lot of TF writing out there, but it doesn't hold back either. It's just when it is important for the story, there's sex, and that is tied to how the characters develop their sexuality and their views of their own gender and stuff like that. So it's really fun to try to explore that. And then with the new characters that will show up in books, particularly in book 4, I think people are gonna go fucking crazy with that, and it's really fun. Let me go through, look at the chat for a second. Okay. There seems to be specific tropes and narrative elements that make fantasy series very popular with the masses. While writing and rewriting, did you try to write a work that appealed to the mass fantasy public, or just wrote what you wanted and just hoped it attracted the right audience? It's a good question. And if I was doing this for a living, I would have been more thoughtful about what it appeals to a wider audience. In this case, I was writing for myself. That was the main goal, and it is an exploration of myself, of my beliefs, my passions, my everything. And if I had written this considering what people might or might not like, it wouldn't I wouldn't have been able to sustain it for how many years has it been? 4 years now, and there's at least 3 or 4 more years before everything is out probably. So it's I wanted something that I would be able to feel happy working on for however long it takes. And to be honest, I after book 6 is published, I already have ideas that I have to contain myself from actually exploring too much, because I can't distract myself that much. But I want a project that feels like I will be passionate about for for decades, hopefully. So no, it's mostly I did look at all the trends. I even bought different types of software that look at what's popular out there for keywords and stuff like that. But that is mostly for marketing after the fact. So I did a little campaign with Amazon ads and Facebook ads that I ran for a short time, and then I canceled because it takes a lot of upkeep, and I don't have enough books yet. It's hard to sell much when you're advertising only one book. So by the time book 3 comes out, I'll probably look into that again. But it's mostly I'm studying the market just to know how to approach reach a bigger audience, because right now my audience is furries. Like probably 90% is furries right now, and that's a pretty awesome audience, but it's still very contained and very hard to break out of that. But I think this has potential for broad appeal, but that's not why I wrote it. So isn't this part of what monster fucking comes from? I guess so. Um, then Seg says, still so happy with the discoveries and navigation of gender and sexuality in the story. Zeg has read more than the first 2 books. He's read quite a lot. So, or they read quite a lot. As a non-binary person, it made me feel so thankful and represented to see someone going through that journey, even if they didn't end up in the same place I did. Yes, and yeah, I just screwed up pronouns right there, and that's something actually that I did a lot while writing. Sorry, Zach. Um, it's I have so many non-binary characters, and to me it was a process also discovering how to face that, how to name it in world, and how to approach that, what that means in the world of Noss. And and there's a lot more explorations of other characters that are not Lago, and that are not just either gay or straight, also, and different genders, different sexualities. So it's, to me, it's like, I don't think I discovered something brand new about myself while writing, but it's a way to express what I already had within me and that I was kind of aware of, and that I just wanted to be able to express more fully. And that whole thing comes through being open about sexuality and stuff like that, which is really cool to be able to do through art, through writing, even the illustrations and stuff like that, everything that's coming for the next few books. So yeah, it's really cool. So I think we have maybe 10 minutes before I have to give the room to someone else. So yeah, let's drop some more questions in there. It can be about the Noss Saga or any of my process or anything else too. But yeah, so yeah, this is the mask. A lot of you guys probably saw this by now. And I think it gets too muffled when I talk through this, so I'm not gonna I didn't try to wear it while doing the presentation. Um, and oh, by the way, I just got a set of stickers, so I'm gonna be selling more copies, signed and doodle copies of book two very soon. And it's something I sold before. It just takes a lot of work to actually pack all the stuff here when I don't have much free time. But yeah, all these copies have little illustrations and some secret messages too. So I'll be selling more of these, and probably in the coming weeks, now that I have more stickers to go with the orders. Do you have a persona? If I did, it would be a secret one. So yes, it's hiding there somewhere, and you won't be able to find it yet. Uh, as your world has different geography from our current Earth, how do you figure out how to place each type of animal in the appropriate equivalent biomes? This is where I cheated. And here's the thing: I wanted certain animals, and well, first of all, in order to have any animal from Earth, you have to have the entire history of Earth, from dinosaurs to amoebas growing in the ocean to impacts of a giant comet that killed a whole bunch of things and mammals in Africa and hominids and all sorts of stuff. So there's no way to really make that work anyway. So the way I approached biomes and all that stuff is, first there was an Earth, or a Noss is the name of the planet, a Noss before this cataclysm called the Downfall, that had a certain distribution of animals, which was probably more similar to what Earth has right now, but it was out of balance because humans fucking everything up. And the series of tribes, the Miskam tribes, ended up trying to find a way to restore balance by grabbing key species from different biomes and mingling them together into ways that would work. And that kind of justifies, random species that are normally not found together being in disparate biomes entirely, but with a new balance, completely new balance. And then the downfall came, which is basically this big cataclysm. And then the species had to repopulate. And then that repopulation came a new balance again. So things were first there were big extinctions, but also new spreading of species through the world. So I do try to justify all of that as much as possible. Um, and um, and I pay attention to, at least to the climates, but not the general geographical position. It doesn't try to match Earth at all, because we don't have the same tectonic plates, and or the same history anyway. Um, are there any bird masks? Yes, there is a bird mask. It's called Crowan Self, and it plays a role in a later book, not in book one. And yeah, it's something I was planning from the beginning. That's had to happen. There's actually one place where I broke some rules for uh, comparative anatomy and stuff like that in taxonomy. Is there's a reptilian mask and there is a bird mask in the story. Now, crocodiles and alligators would be more closely related to birds than to reptiles, but I just couldn't see them being placed with the birds. Like, it's that the clade of birds, and then having crocs in there just didn't make sense. And dropping crocs out of the picture also didn't make sense because they're fucking cool, and I didn't want to just get rid of them. So there's another aspect of how, a tree of life is not branching out always. Sometimes branches merge back in, and that can be, simply from not only it's not only about DNA. It's about certain properties, certain convergent evolutions that happen, and how things become more similar to each other. If we're talking about the external um, uh, aspects of a different clade or a different species. So that's kind of how I justify it. There's another in-world thing that I can't talk about. It just kind of comes with this idea of mind speech, which is a way that animals communicate in the world. But I have my way of getting around that, because I needed to have at least crocodiles and alligators related to reptiles more than birds for that. Um, who's best boy? Best boy is K. Um, from your perspective, what is the best way to explore the TF trope? I think I don't know. It's a hard question. To me, it's simply I explore what my story needed to be told. So I picked the aspects, attributes of TF that work for my stories. Like I said, like I didn't do the giant werewolf hunky daddy thing because it just didn't fit this story in particular. And my story is about connections, these threads, these interconnectedness of consciousness, and so that's I made my own version of that. So trying to be original is fun. It doesn't need to be though. It's like there's so much lore out there that works perfectly fine, and you don't need any 500 more pages to actually explain how things work if you're just going to be working some tropes that are established already. So that makes it much easier to write, I think. But to me, it's more fun to try to find a new take on it. Are there insect shapeshifters? So in this case, there are certain masks, and the masks that actually allow you to shapeshift is they're basically mostly related to mammals or vertebrates. So in this world, currently not, but there's not. It doesn't mean that there's no possibility for that. Now there are the spirits of each clade of animal, and even potentially more than animals. But that gets a little spoilery. But yeah, there's a possibility that I explore later in later books too. Um, Yeah. Oh, by the way, since everyone is on Discord right now, there is a Noss Saga Discord. If you guys want to join, it's basically just sharing art before I share it anywhere else, and it's it has a non-safe for work area, so just be aware of that. And it's just a bunch of people chatting, a bunch of people I see here on the chat already. So if you want to join that, I'll paste the link here in a second. Let me see if I find it. Yeah, it's right there. Feel free to drop in. It's not open to the public, so please don't post this anywhere. It's just gonna be here for this for you guys. Feel free to join there and share some artwork, TF or not. It's a bunch of random shit in there, but it's very small and want to keep it that way. So yeah, not sharing all this outside of here. But yeah, got only a couple more minutes, so if you guys have more questions, let me know. I'm just gonna hang out and yeah, thank you all for coming. It's always weird to read your own stuff out loud, particularly when my accent gets like really thick when I'm nervous, and when I'm reading it's even worse. I don't know if you noticed, but it's like I sound so very Mexican even though I'm Paraguayan. It's like this very weird thing where it just thickens out very quickly. Um, anyway, so yeah, thank you for coming, and yeah, check out the Noss Saga. It's books 1 and 2 are out. Book 3 is being edited. And also, I'm working with the furry community quite tightly with this. A furry editor, furry proofreader. 90% of the beta readers are furries. Fox Amore is doing the music for the audiobook. The audiobook narrator is not a furry, but I'm trying to convert him. And then what else? Yeah, there's just a whole bunch of people involved. They're all from the fandom because it's really fun that way. It's like so much more open. It's such a nice little community to be able to work with. Yeah, Fox Amore is he's not only doing the music for the audiobooks, but that music is going to go into not just one album, but he's planning 3 albums, basically 2 per book. Oh, sorry, 1 album per 2 books, and he's doing the orchestral versions of book 1 and 2 right now. So yeah, it's a lot of work, and he's working super hard on that. Yeah. Yeah, Fox is fantastic. It's a pleasure to work with him. It's just so awesome. Um, and yeah, it's like and working with him and the narrator for the audiobook has been so fucking cool. It's really really fun. And then basically every time he sends me a sketch of a song that's already overdone and super pretty, it's like Christmas for me. Opening my little file in Telegram. It's like, oh my god, I gotta play it right now. I'm just like, he usually messages 5 a.m. because of the time difference, and I'm just sitting in bed or laying in bed, just tapping, trying to listen to the new takes. It's so awesome. But yeah, I gotta jump out of here. Feel free to join the Noss Saga Discord or find me around. I'm on Blue Sky mostly today and nowadays. As That's where you'll find me. I'll be posting more about the saga and all sorts of art and all this stuff in there too. But thank you all for coming. It's really nice. Thank you, Bash, for inviting me to this too. Really awesome. I was playing all the other stages while I was working today, just leaving in the background. It's really fun to just have someone, a nice conversation going on in the background there while hanging around home all Saturday.